Hello fellow lovers of the liminal and the weird, and welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. Today we are going to discuss another Roger Zelazny novel. This is the second novel of Roger Zelazny's we'll be discussing on the channel, and that is This Immortal. This novel was an absolute ride. It was an action-packed, idea-driven concept that I really enjoyed. I found that it started a little slower than I wanted it to for my tastes, but that quickly gave way to really incredible adventuring. And I want to talk about really quick, just give a little bit of a synopsis of what is going on in this novel. The concept is really, really incredible. So Earth experiences a war, an atomic war, that of course puts it into a destroyed post-apocalyptic mutant creating situation. And soon after that, an alien race known as Vegans start buying property on Earth, and they do this because they are really, really bored. They're a very peaceful species. They have lived in peace for years. They're way more technologically advanced than we are, but they kind of become obsessed with our planet because it is the first time they've seen a culture kind of destroy itself in the way that we had. So they start setting up these resorts to come and tour the bombed out remains of Earth. Really interesting stuff. And there is a character named Conrad that is given a mission to go and tour this specific vegan around to show him parts of Earth, because this vegan is going to write a book. And it turns out that Conrad, and this is where the second major idea of this novel comes in, is secretly an immortal. He's been alive for a very long time. Just how long, the book really never gives away. The very first line of the novel is, "You are a Calacanzaros." Yeah, I don't have any idea how to say that. But anyway, if you look up Calacanzaros, it is a specific type of Greek little demon that is born on Christmas Eve. It instantly kind of calls into question what exactly Conrad is, and as the novel goes on, we find out more and more about him and how long he has been alive, and a little bit of his kind of superhuman, almost demigod-like powers. So that is a basic synopsis of this book. Really interesting premise. But I want to get into, before I really jump into my review proper, a little bit of the history of this book. So, it was first published in a condensed or abridged form in the October and November 1965 issues, October and November 1965 issues of fantasy and science fiction. I've looked through these, and unfortunately there's no real illustrations in them, which is too bad, but we do get this cool cover. Every one of these things that you see in this are in the novel. The vampire guy, the dog, and the boar, and the horned pan-like devil creature, all are in this story. And the fun of this, I think, is similar in a way to Gene Wolfe, in that you're constantly questioning whether these are magical, fantastic creatures or leftovers from this awful war, this awful atomic war. Sorry, I got off on a tangent there. So, it was released in October, November of 1965 in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction. And then it was released by Ace Books in an unabridged version in 1966 by Ace Books, and they changed the name to This Immortal. It was called And Call Me Conrad. They changed it to This Immortal. Zelazny preferred the original title. That seemed to happen to the first couple of books by Zelazny, at least the two I've done so far. they have done that. In an interesting twist, this book was released before The Dream Master. By Ace. Ace also released The Dream Master. So this is called Roger Zelazny's first novel. And I don't know if that's absolutely true, because it came out in fantasy and science fiction in October and November of 65. And if you look on Wikipedia's bibliography, that's when they show the release date for this, is by the date of these being released. But the novel Dream Master, or novella Dream Master, was released in January and February of 1965 in Amazing Stories. So almost, 8-9 months before Call Me Conrad was released, The Dream Master was already out. They just happened to release this before The Dream Master. I would love it if anybody that really knows Roger Zelazny or has any interview information, if anybody can tell me what he wrote first, whether it was The Dream Master or He Who Shapes is another name for that one, or Call Me Conrad / This Immortal. I would love to know what came first. Anyway, both of them won awards. Roger Zelazny's This Immortal won the 1966 Hugo for Best Novel, and it tied, of course, with Frank Herbert's Dune. So these two novels have always been kind of linked, not thematically in any way, shape, or form, but in the science fiction world, because they both won the 1966 Hugo and tied, and of course this one went on to incredible heights, and This Immortal, not a lot of people are talking about. In fact, not a lot of people are talking about Roger Zelazny in general, unless they're talking about his works in the fantasy genre. And this is interesting because this kind of trails the line between fantasy and science fiction, whereas his first one, the one that was published in January of 65, The Dream Master, was just hard sci-fi, I think, really, truly. Although there are fantastic elements that come into it. But anyway, yeah, so that's kind of the basic history of the publication of This Immortal. Next, let's take a look at the characters. Conrad is an incredible character, really enjoyable. I really liked the way that he reacted to situations. He was humorous, he was philosophical. He really did seem like a great character to be the main lead in this legend, and I'll get into why I call this legend in a bit. His wife, Cassandra, who is not in the novel long, is hilarious. I really enjoyed her character because she is based, of course, on the Cassandra through Greek mythology. Cassandra was given the gift of being able to prophesy the future, but also the curse of no one ever believing her. And of course, they make a funny concept out of that in this. Roger Zelazny did, and it was very well done. Jocelyn is another great character. Phil, all of them I feel are memorable. George, the biologist, I think all of them are memorable, but all of them take a little bit of a backseat to Conrad. And even the vegan doesn't, although he's so important, doesn't have a lot of screen time, if you will, in this book, as much as Conrad does. I think Haslan is the second one. Hassan, I think is his name. I'm sorry, not Haslan. What is Haslan from? That's, I think, from Earthsea. I don't know. Hassan is the name of the assassin that's there with him. Another really great character, and that was not a plot spoiler. It comes out very quickly. So yeah, the characters were really well developed throughout this. I think the part of this book that took me the longest to realize was happening is the idea that Zelazny was very slowly introducing us to the concept that he was writing myth. This is, in my opinion, a myth. He's taking the Greek myths and writing a new one. And this is a myth of the modern ages. And it's something that he would return to again and again. Apparently, the most successful version of which was Lord of Light, which is the next one that I'll read for this channel once I get back to Zelazny. So this was his first foray into that concept of creating a legend or an epic or a myth that includes elements of science fiction. And I feel like that worked well once I had made the realization that that's what it was. And it seemed weird to me that it took him so long to show his hand, that that's what he was doing, because the minute I knew that, the book was 100 times better. The first party scene and all the political intrigue and stuff didn't interest me, and that is not really a bad comment against Roger Zelazny. That's just not what I prefer. I'm not a huge fan of spy and political intrigue and all that kind of stuff. I don't care for that as much. So when I figured out what this was, I was 100% on board. And I think that I have to remember, and I think all readers do, that this, and I would love to be corrected if anybody knows if this was the first time that we got this concept of writing modern fiction but incorporating gods or demigods into it. I think this was a big idea by Zelazny at the time, and it is one that, of course, has become very popular over time, right? We have stuff like American Gods and young adult stuff like Percy Jackson. All of them kind of fit, in my opinion, into this same kind of concept. But Zelazny was doing it way earlier. And I don't know if he's the first to kind of popularize this idea, but I had to remember as I was reading that he was introducing people to an idea that was new at the time and now is not new at all. So I was like, God, it took you long enough to get to the point. But once it hit that point, it was a lot of fun. Okay, from here on out, I am going to spoil this novel. I'm not going to do a complete deep read on this like I do a lot of stuff on my channel, mainly because it doesn't necessitate one. It doesn't need one. This is a much more straightforward book than The Dream Master, so I can get quickly through what I want to say about this one. And I've already said a bunch of that, which is once it turned into a legend or a saga or a myth, I was having a great time. And I love old legend and saga and myth. I studied it throughout college, along with folk and fairy tales. It is how the narratives that we tell, the narratives that we have told for years, the narratives that have become religions, all of this is really interesting to me, and I think it was to Zelazny as well, and it really shows in this book. It's strange because it's Greek, but if I were to pin it down to what the reading situation was like for me, it reminded me more of Irish mythology, like the Toyne. I was thinking of the Toyne the whole time I was reading this, even though it's supposed to be connected with Greek mythology. It didn't have the same feel as Greek mythology does for me. And the reason I bring up Irish mythology and the Toyne is because this is about a bigger-than-life hero, and the entire story is watching him do impossible things. And I know that can be said about almost all myths, but this had a particular flavor that reminded me of the early Irish myth. There is a mutated dog in this, and that was true in Zelazny's last one, The Dream Master. I love this concept. Conrad has a dog that is absolutely incredible. He's kind of a deus ex machina, jumps in at the last minute. Incredible. In fact, there's a couple of deus ex machinas in this. Deus ex machinas. Sorry, I said that wrong. He has to fight a massive boar, which of course does connect to Hercules. His wife is called Cassandra. That connects to, I think, the Iliad. So there are a lot of mythological connections here. The part that seemed the best to me and that I have to spoil to talk about is the fact that Roger Zelazny left this novel open for you to try to decide if Conrad is the god Pan. I believe he keeps connecting him to Pan with the playing of the pipes. Or is he somebody that was affected by the nuclear war and has mutated because of that, and that is why he has lived so long. He has a son named Jason that's an old man that helps him along, and there's a lot of talk about Jason and the Argonauts. Could his son be Jason? The connections go on and on, but the real fun of this novel is the concept of using a post-apocalyptic world in order to tell another Greek myth, to add to the canon of Greek myths one that is modern. So modern, in fact, that it has aliens coming and trying to buy up Earth to see what a culture that destroys itself looks like. If I had to list a couple of small complaints about this, the first would be that it took so long, but I've already explained that I think at the time that was probably very clever, because the concept of gods walking amongst men or demigods amongst humans wasn't done as much as it is now. So now they can get right to it. And back then, I think they needed to introduce this concept. The other is, and this is really vague, and again, it might connect to that same thing, the idea of an alien race making contact with us only because they're shocked that we would be stupid enough to just destroy ourselves, and then to set up tourism so that they could point and look at the species that was stupid enough to destroy themselves, is so interesting, and in my opinion takes a little too much of a back seat in this novel. I would have loved to have seen that expanded just a little more, and I get why it wasn't, because if you look at the two ideas, I feel like Zelazny probably was more excited about the Greek myth aspect than he was the Vegans buying up Earth to gawk at a species that destroyed itself. And he was right, because that became a subgenre that is still to this day absolutely beloved, right? Gods walking among us, American gods, Percy Jackson, all that. So I can see why he did that. So those would be my only really two complaints about it. The monsters that I discussed on this front cover, spoilers, this dog is a mutated dog from the war. It has armadillo-like armor, and it's huge. It's the last dog in existence, which was absolutely incredible. This boar is the same, just a mutated huge boar that made me think of Mononoke Hime. This vampire is really interesting. It is just an albino human that is being really misused by a tribe of mutants. And then this Pan-looking figure, what do they call him, is a satyr, and again, we wonder, just like everything in this novel, is this a mutant from the nuclear war, or is this Greek mythology being alive and well throughout all time? Great novel. I highly recommend it. I enjoyed the read very much, and I think you all will as well. It is much more of an adventure story than The Dream Master, and that was just fine. Like I said, I love reading old myths and legends and sagas, and this, to me, was Roger Zelazny trying to create a modern myth or legend. So it was very much enjoyable read, but you have to get through that first part, and the party scene with all the different people being introduced can be a little tedious, but once you get past that, it's really worth it. And his connection with Hassan and their friendship is really interesting, and Phil, really all of them. It's really interesting. Yeah, so give it a read, and I think you will really enjoy it. If you watched this video to the end, thank you very much. If you liked it, please click like, and if you like this kind of content, please subscribe. We'll be making a lot more of it in the future.